Don't live inside your head. Just listen. It's there. Like people are telling you, users are telling you you're wrong. The signals are there. You don't even need to dig it up. It's all in the surface. Just listen.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scary Dev Tools. I'm joined today by my friends Igor and Utpal from Digger.dev. Digger.dev is an open source Terraform cloud alternative. And yeah, welcome guys.
Thanks, Jack. Nice, super happy to be here.
Thanks, excited to be here.
Okay, so I was like very briefly kind of working with you guys a little bit, like probably 2 years ago, something like that. And at that time, you guys were like, well, at the very first point, you were kind of like the power of AWS, but a Heroku-like experience at that time. And what I remember like very distinctly is that you were very good at kind of shipping ideas and experiments and kind of using that to tweak the messaging. And now things are like, you're doing something like very differently. And there's 3 of you and but now with like a smaller team, you're growing and I'm seeing like a ton of traction and it seems like it's going really well. So I have personally a lot of questions about like how you got from this like quite a difficult message to get across to something that really resonates with people and is growing. And I've seen like your community Slack support requests are like, it's like that classic like exponential graph. So yeah, like that probably a big question, but I wonder if you could kind of tell me a little bit about that.
Thanks. So first of all, it's great to hear these your assessment of how we iterated. Certainly lots of learning along the way, and well, that's probably the reason we're still around and have some exciting signs of growth and traction. Well, back then we had this what we thought can be called an idea. Probably the biggest learning is that, well, if it's just in your head, that's probably not a real thing. And you can actually check if it's a real thing by trying to go out, sell it, and get people to use it. And if they don't use it, then maybe that's not the right thing. I mean, that sounds obvious, right? But it took us a while to sort of get into that actual honesty with ourselves. Like, is it working or not? And if you spend a month pushing something out and it's not working, as in like not growing quickly, then it's probably not working. These kind of things. So we went from making AWS great again, which is, okay, cool. But in one startup with like 7 people, can we really make all of AWS great again? The answer is probably no. Probably need to do something smaller. And so we started shaving off features. And we thought application deployment, we're not going to touch that. And then we ended up with like kind of infrastructure automation thing. For some reason, which is fun, we built it on top of Terraform, which is, one can say, a bit of over engineering. So we ended up with a tool that you can sort of connect your Git repository and get it deployed, and then customize the underlying Terraform. Well, this is cool, but still too big. So then we realized, well, why would we even touch the application thing? Why don't we just deploy people's Terraform? And then we realized that we just built an inferior version of Terraform Cloud. It worked, but like on all accounts, it was worse than the Terraform Cloud. Okay. And then we thought, could we actually make it better? And turns out, yes, we could. And so we made it open source. And the key insight we had was like, why are we running it on our servers? It's going to be expensive, right? So we thought we just reuse the CI that people already have. And we put together like a scrappy GitHub action Literally took a week, just a week. Put it out on Reddit, and people are like, "Oh shit, I'm going to use that." Like a couple hundred people engaged, started using. That was a year ago. That gave us some confidence to kind of double down. And yeah, that's our product now. Rewritten in Go in a couple of weeks. But yeah, that's still the same.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. At some point, you're going to land a big customer and they're going to ask you for enterprise features. That's where WorkOS comes in, because they give you these features out the box. Features like skim provisioning, SAML authentication, and audit logs. They have an easy-to-use API, and they're trusted by big dev tools like Vercel, as well as smaller, fast-growing dev tools like Knock. So if you're looking to cross the enterprise chasm and make yourself enterprise ready, check out WorkOS. We've also done an episode with Michael, the founder of WorkOS, where he shares a lot of tips around crossing the enterprise chasm, landing your first enterprise deals, and making sure that you're ready for them. Thanks, WorkOS, for sponsoring the podcast, and back to the show.
That's amazing. And like, was that like a fundamental like mindset shift before that like, was it just you were doing the same things that when I was there, which was like, there was like lots of kind of like, can we ship something in a week? Can we make like a big splash in a week with an experiment? Was that like also that same style of doing things, or was it like
improved, I'd say?
Yeah.
That motto is probably the reason we're still around, because that's what keeps you accountable, right? Like if you can't make enough of traction in a week or two, you better acknowledge that all your beliefs are bullshit. Like there's no way around that. Like there's no way around that. But doing that repeatedly led us to this sort of place of desperation when we basically proved by shipping all possible things within the original idea that the original idea is not the great idea. And so that was the first step of like, we proved ourselves wrong. Now what? I mean, it was a pretty miserable place when, like, you just crossed all boxes. It's almost like a checklist. Could we try this? And then the full list is crossed off and nothing is working. Like, it kind of sucks. But then I remember it clearly. We were sitting in this National Theater, cafe, and then like eating some chicken, and like kind of this elephant in the room is there. And like we're just sitting there, and everyone's eating lunch, and there's this awkward silence, and like everyone knows that it's not working. And then we had this random debate that happened, like, oh, is it like Terraform Cloud? Could it be better? Why it's no open source? And it all took like maybe 30 minutes to kind of arrive at this, let's try this. Because that was pretty much the only thing that hadn't been tried. And then the next week we shipped it, scrappy thing in Python, like the worst possible way to build a DevOps tool. We cut all the corners just to ship it in a week, but then it actually took off. And then we rewrote it in Go. Then someone said us, a bunch of users told us, like, why is it not in Go? Like literally. And no one in the team knew Go. So we picked it up and like we wrote it in Go anyway. And that got us a bit further. But yeah, same kind of approach, I guess.
Yeah. Why do you think this one was different? Like, do you know?
Well, it takes a good deal of learning to see the signs when they're there. Like if I were to do it again on all the launches that you've seen and been part of, and actually, I mean, you remember these, Lemon and AWS Bootstrap and all of this. Like you can see when it's not working. If you trace the funnel, you get all the way down to retention, and if people are not sticking around, that's your answer. There's nothing you can try top of the funnel that will fix it. People are not sticking around. That's your answer. It doesn't work.
I think that's like a really key point about like, if it's like, just because I think like Digger and all the early iterations got like a ton of like buzz, right? Like it was like product of the day, and like it's quite big on like Hacker News and everything. And like a lot of people were coming through, but I guess they weren't sticking around.
Yeah. And it can be known in a couple of days. So you don't need months
Yeah.
of like more launches, more traffic, more anything. Like it's not going to fix it. People not sticking around. You built the wrong thing. Move on. Like that is just hard to acknowledge.
Yeah. And like, if you had to like kind of like step back and analyze like why do people stick around for like the current iteration versus like the first iterations?
I think this one's points of failure, right? Like, I think by removing different parts of the product, we limited points of failure. Earlier, again, small team, we used to go on demos where we used to just sit with them and try to walk through the entire journey. And each time the point of failure was different, right? Like obviously, small team and, we're shipping fast. So corners have been cut in different places. And then we sort of realized that, hey, look, there's a corner cut here. Hey, look, there's a corner cut there and stuff like that. But shrinking those points of failure, I think actually helped in terms of retention, if that makes sense, because lesser points of failure means, so it was sort of, if you want to plot a Venn diagram, it's limiting points of failure and actually something people wanted. And I think we had that intersection of sorts that we, with this iteration.
So it's like the smallest possible thing that people want, in a sense.
Yep. It's do one thing well. Like another learning, which is a hard one. And so many people, including us, refuse to believe it. It's written everywhere in YC and like, and we're like, no, we're special. But like, if you try to solve many problems and build a product which is defined by like doing many things, which we had this AWS do it well, like functions, containers, databases, deployment, infrastructure, like all of these things, different, like we thought of it as features, but these were like different problems which different people would have at different times. And you actually just need to imagine a one person, single person with a name, like find their LinkedIn profile and see like, do they have a problem? When they have a problem? And then, build a product for more people like that with the exact same problem. Sounds obvious, but our original product was all over the place. Different types of people with different types of problems. And so the definition of a product was like many different things in one place. And that's not a product, that's a bag of features. And you can't just, launch a bag of features and hope for like success. One thing well, as soon as we did one thing well, it actually could be any other thing, I think. It just pick one and do it well. And then maybe something good happens.
That week where you launched this iteration, like what did you do? In a very almost like boring way, like what exactly did you do when you launched this?
What happened was like there were 4 of us or 5 of us, and each one was tasked with coming up with a version of. So there's an open source competition or a competitor tool. We see them as inspiration. It's called Atlantis, and it's very well known, used by some very large organizations. And so we actually thought of, how does Atlantis do stuff? How do the other commercial vendors do stuff? And how can we come up with the smallest possible implementation of it in the week, in that week? And then, of course, there were 4 people tasked with doing it. In terms of a task, it was like almost like a coding challenge of sorts.
Yeah.
But then, we arrived at one implementation after the end of that week, and that implementation was running it within Actions, and it was called TF Run at back then. And then actually, what followed from that was that, why are people using Terraform Cloud if this can achieve what they want to do? And that is the exact same question we went and asked Reddit. And then we said, hey, look, we have a very lightweight implementation of this. We've cut corners. It's not perfect, but look at this. And then we linked TF Run that we'd sort of gone over in that week, and then said, look, do you want to tell us why you use Terraform Cloud? Do you want to go and, give TF Run a spin? TF Run became Digger later on, but initially it was called TF Run because, well, we didn't know if that's the, pivot that we're going to be doing. So it was an experiment, but yeah. And then people ended up commenting, and obviously people have opinions, right? So they said, here's what they use Terraform Cloud for. Here's what they use competing vendors for. Here's what they use Atlantis for. Here's what Atlantis does well. Here's what Terraform Cloud doesn't do well. And then, that actually acts as a source of truth for us even today, because people keep commenting even today. I think it's a year plus in terms of how old that post is on Reddit, but like we still keep getting people commenting there today. And well, yeah, that sort of gave us confidence and also gave us some knowledge in terms of how the tool is used in the current state.
And did they use it as well? These people, did they try it out and like use it on Reddit?
Yeah, there was usage for sure, because it was super lightweight and it was a GitHub action, so there was usage. Back then, we didn't know analytics, no telemetry, there was nothing. But yeah, there was usage and there was issues flagged. There was people joining Slack and commenting. That's when. So another sort of community validation for us was. And how we knew people were using, because we didn't have any guardrails set up or anything set up back then, was people joining Slack and shouting when things didn't work, or commenting and letting us know that, hey, look, this doesn't work. Hey, look, I think this is what you need. Or just, contributing because they want something that doesn't currently exist, and then they started contributing. None of this was known to us yet because we had never maintained an open source project before. And then, yeah, we knew that people started using because they came and said, hey, look, we're using this. We're considering using it in production. Can it have feature X or feature Y? Can it have drift detection? And can it have, I don't know, are you thinking about state management? These questions came up. But yeah, that's how we initially knew that people were using it, because even if you look at our Slack members graph, like there's an inflection point of sorts in Feb 2023. That's when TF Run was launched. Late Feb, early March 2023. And then from then, the growth of the Slack community in general was, it was growing at a much faster rate.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like, do people, because it's like, it's not just like go to the website or like, oh, this is cool. It's like actually dig in, hit a roadblock, ask a question. It's like, and you care enough. You don't just give up. You like actually care enough to like go and find out the answer because you believe in this thing.
Yep.
I guess
there's one more thing that told this experiment was different from any other. For all the time before this, there was a need to maintain this sort of, they call it vision in your head. This is how it needs to be, the product, the hypothetical sort of, end state of this thing. And it needs to be like, you need to keep it in your head and you need to like see it, right? Because otherwise, how do you know what to do? With this one, like, no, it's all there. People tell you like exactly what's missing. And they tell you like, I would use it if, and there's like a list of problems, and that's it. There's no need to like invent some kind of new thing. It's just like there. And that's felt refreshing.
I love it so much. I'm going to apply this to my own experiments. And like, Igor, one question I had is like, I remember like, there was some point like where we were talking about like the analytics matter and stuff like that and measuring like, I'm talking about like at the earlier stages, like do you still worry about like having like analytics in place or this sort of thing?
I'm glad you asked. I guess I'll hand over to Utpal because he can do a better summary of that. I
think yeah, initially we weren't very keen on measuring stuff, or it's also in terms of shipping fast, you ship the most important stuff first. So I think in speed, initially we were not measuring enough. But that's something we've tried to correct as much as possible with this iteration. Given that it's stuck, how many Docker downloads do we have? Obviously, we've experimented with telemetry. Sometimes there's been backlash from the community as well, right? Like how much telemetry is enough in open source and not? Like that's the age-old question as well. But yeah, we've arrived at a certain, the community has actually shown us how telemetry should work. And now I think we're measuring it in a manner where we know how much weekly active usage growth is. And, if it's not growing, we are aware that it's not growing. We know how much, let's say, a launch or a particular growth activity contributes to weekly active usage growth. We sort of can understand how retention works and stuff like that. I think over time, that's a learning that I think we should measure more and make measuring a non-negotiable. I think that's a learning from iterations prior that, there are some corners that you cannot cut. if that makes sense. And I think measuring usage and measuring retention is something that we've learned the hard way, but now I think we're doing a good job. And that's helping in terms of what features are used the most and that sort of stuff. Basically, how traditionally analytics is work. We took a while to realize best practices, I guess.
I'd like to add to this that it's like very often people are like, oh, we need a full suite of analytics integrator, like all sorts of segments, Junes, and whatever. And it's a good idea if you can. But what's needed really, all you need, and that's the one non-negotiable, you need a way to know that you are wrong in the super fundamental way, like this whole thing is bullshit kind of wrong. And you need a way to know it quickly. There always is a way. That's the truth. There always is a way to know it in a week or a month. Like, month is too much. If it takes a month to learn that you're wrong, like, come on, that there are faster ways. But fundamentally, what we started with was like recording user actions from like this action and posting it to Slack. And then it was like just activity, just like someone did something. And then from there, we would manually compile monthly, weekly, whatever numbers. No analytics whatsoever in the sense. We just recorded events and just went over it one by one, by hand. And that gave the answer that the usage is growing. And if it didn't grow, that would be the answer that we created another piece of bullshit. But we were lucky enough to, have the opposite. But we had this core of analytics, and that's the non-negotiable, I guess. You need a way to prove yourself wrong really quickly.
So the thing that totally makes sense is that like you launch and then you see like, do people care about it? Like, do they make an effort? Or do they just say that's cool? But then once you kind of get past that initial point of like, okay, people are trying to use this thing, people are joining Slack and stuff. But then you mention like, if it's not growing, then it's also not, like, in your words, like it's also a piece of bullshit. Like if it's, is that also like, because that hypothetically could just be like, okay, we just didn't market it that well that week, or like, were you kind of, okay, this is correct, or was it like a constant process of?
It takes like, you don't need to market a lot. It's more like you got some people from a launch. Like, was it 10 people? Well, most launches, even the worst ones, get 10 people. And then like, what happened to these 10 people? Like, are they still around?
Yeah.
That kind of question, right?
Yeah.
And then, are we still getting usage from them? If it's anonymous, let's say, right? Same ID, like anonymized hash, right? Is it still present? And then like, if the answer is no, and it's no for all 10 of the first 10 users, you don't really need a big splash to know that something's not right. They just don't come back, right? Like that's it. That's the answer.
Yeah.
And then like top funnel thing, as soon as you fix the bottom funnel, then any small activity at the top funnel just blows up. You just do a little thing. Like you just put something out there and oh shit, it goes all the way down because people are sticking around.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Cause like you guys have had a few, I mean, there's the big like HashiCorp thing, and the OpenTofu and stuff like that. That must have been like a big kind of boost, right?
I think there was a bigger boost right before, I think about a month or so before that, just before the OpenTofu fork happened. It actually started because Igor wrote an article on our Golang saying we moved to Golang in a week. And that's when actually our sort of growth journey with this iteration of Digger started. And PrimeAgen picked it up, right? Like, so PrimeAgen, the dev influencer, he picked it up.
Yeah.
He went over the entire article and he nodded and agreed with every bit of it. And that's when we first saw the power of YouTube, by the way, because we'd never experimented with YouTube as a growth strategy at all. And so Igor posted that on Reddit. and then we go out for a weekend, right? Like, okay, we're off and we're not doing anything. And I start seeing these stars. So I have a notification that comes every time somebody stars, and I see we're getting a lot of these stars, and I'm like, where is this coming from? Is this spam? Is this where's this? What's happening? And then I realized that Igor's post on Reddit has gone viral. So I thought, okay, cool. This Reddit post has gone viral, and it'll sort of, a Reddit post has a life cycle, right? About 48 hours, and then it'll probably subside. And I thought, okay, cool. Amazing. We got a bunch of 150 stars. But then it kept continuing for that. So on Monday we returned, and like stars had grown by like 600 or so. And I'm like,
really?
What's happened? And then
what was the baseline at that point? Was like roughly like
about 400, 500-ish.
Oh my God.
And then at the end of it, we came out like 1500-ish. And in a matter of a week or so. It's hard, right? Like the Terraform sphere in some sense is smaller. Like Atlantis has like 7K after 6-7 years of existing, and people know of it. Like impression share is pretty good, but like the number of people who star, or the entire space is not as big as, let's say, what it would be for an open source Notion alternative or an open source Calendly alternative. So we had this entire burst of activity from that video. It still brings us users, by the way. If somebody joins Slack and says, hey, I watched Primeagen video, and like
really?
I joined because I want to know how you moved from Python to Golang in a week. What did that involve? And then so basically that's a conversation starter. But then what we did, over the weekend, I was like, okay, we've tried a show HN a couple of times. Let me just try a show HN. And then the show HN goes to the front page as well. So it was like a cascading effect of the Reddit post first, and then the Primeagen video, and then the Hack News post, and then cumulatively it sort of gave us a boost in terms of.
What was the show HM was just like, here's Digger sort of thing?
No, show HN was show HN, open source Terraform cloud alternative. That's it.
Okay.
And that's it. Literally, that's it. And it was a Saturday, and I was like, cool, let me try, because people seem to be liking it, and we should ideally get to GitHub trending with these many number of stars in such a small amount of period, like such a small time period. And I was like, cool, let me just try. Why not? And then I think I read Charlie Munger's book, and he says Lollapalooza a lot. And I think this is a Lollapalooza effect. There was
converging.
the Reddit post, and then the Primeagen video, and then the show HN. So that was the first spike of sorts that we had, and we were trending for about a week after that. And a lot of users who started using then still use Digger, like they're attached, and they have very strong opinions, keep sharing super valuable feedback. But the users we acquired in that cohort, a large section of them still use Digger.
Wow, that's amazing. And just like kind of like stepping back for 1 second, like, so Igor, like when you wrote that article, like what were you thinking on that? Is it like replicatable?
It's very different, looking back at it versus what was going on in my head back then, because it's almost like it always feels like you don't know what you're doing. You're just trying some random stuff, borderline desperation, and then boom, one of the 100 attempts, blows up. Because you're always in this, kind of let's try because what else? And this was one of those. And that, like, why did we rewrite this thing in Go? I just sort of jotted down some thoughts because it was a controversial decision. It's just like, you don't rewrite products in language from one language to another, because like that's like, from anyone who's been in engineering for like, several years would tell you it's a bad idea.
The Joel Spolsky.
Yeah. Like, no, you don't rewrite things. Tools don't really matter as most people think they do. And like, you pick something, something, you build something. If it creates value, then, later on you'll have resources to rebuild it. That's the conventional wisdom. And most likely you are running all the architecture assumptions anyway. So that's why you don't, pick the right tool. You just pick a tool and build it. That's the conventional wisdom. And now we went against it. And I felt like that needs to be explained. Like, it wasn't even for virality. It was like, this is why we did it. And then it blew up because, well,
it's just interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's quite quite good to have like an opinion on something.
It's true. It's like that opinion was probably, and that's also, I think that piece in large part I learned from you that the content is about creating new kind of knowledge in a sense. I'm not quoting probably, but I attribute that piece of learning to you for some reason.
Cool.
Maybe something you said when we worked together or something like that. But the thought of like content is not like words, right? You bring new knowledge to the world in a sense. And if it's not new knowledge, then like, what's the point? And we tried that a couple times. And that kind of content actually resonated very differently compared to something that is just, mechanical word generation. Like as soon as you start writing about a real challenge, which many people could like disagree with, that's when it's
I feel like it's like that kind of like, if it's something that was like a difficult decision and you made a choice, it was like a hard choice, just sharing that, even if it's like it is really is great. And it's great that you amplified it as well, like Utpal, seeing like this is taking off, like how do we get the most out of this is amazing.
That was the plan. And we've tried, so again, read in another book that virality is poker and not roulette, right? Like we've tried to recreate this Lollapalooza effect, but it's extremely hard. Things need to fall into place on its own. And it just happened because we didn't try. But then when you try it again, like replication is hard. If that makes sense.
You should go back to Python and like write about, we rewrote it back into Python. I guess just like a general question, like going back, like if you were like going back to those guys like 2 years ago, like what would you be telling them to do?
Listen. Don't live inside your head. Just listen. It's there. Like people are telling you, users or whoever are telling you you're wrong. The signals are there. It's not even, you don't even need to dig it up. It's all in the surface. Just listen. And, that's the answer. Just listen more.
That's, that's amazing. That's an amazing way to end it. I can say like, I have learned a lot in this. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. If you're using Terraform, like definitely check out Digger. Like, great guys. And, where can people learn more?
Digger.dev.
Digger.dev.
Or join Slack. Yeah. Digger.dev or our GitHub repo. But Digger.dev is a lot of work's been put in. So would love for people to check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for joining. And thanks everyone for listening. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.